Don't think this is just another self-help podcast. It's not.
Well, what is it?
It's still a hot mess, where we ask the question, is self-help helping?
Every episode, we discuss, debate, and sometimes diss an aspect of the self-improvement movement.
We want to know, is it all too much? Has it gone too far? Is it making us even more neurotic? Is this self-help or self-help?
You make a mess of me.
You know, vulnerability was never associated with being brave. It was associated with the weakest animal in the herd being the most at risk of being hunted and killed. So the term vulnerability has had a bad rap.
Oh, yeah. I would think, well, up until recently, we've associated with, weakness, like you just said.
Like due to Homo sapiens becoming less tuned into the animal world and tuned more inwardly to our own hyper-intellectual and emotional world, first world problem, the notion that vulnerability is a feeling and that feeling is associated with exposure to rejection, abandonment, and criticism, that's been on the rise. And as recently as the last few years, it's really flourishing.
Yes.
It's a real self-help buzzword.
Well, I mean, thanks to, shall we say it now? Shall we give her a shout out now?
We could, but can I say this?
Yes.
And it may lead to that.
Okay, we'll build up to it.
Yeah. Is Susan.
Yes.
As
Vincent.
a self-help junkie and a lover of gurus and a self-help author in your own right, what's your take on the age of being vulnerable?
I think it is probably one of the most powerful things we can do if we want to live an authentic life and have a sense of connection. So if in these days where stress and anxiety pervade, if we want any kind of hope in hell in experiencing, this thing called joy.
The what?
Joy.
That's a fun word.
If we want to feel connected, I think we need to, I think we do need to let our guard down.
Did
I answer your question?
I'm not
even?
sure. Like, I'm just wondering.
Maybe ask me again and I'll come up
we,
with something completely different.
Can joy exist without vulnerability?
I don't think a great amount of joy can. I think you're very limited in your experience with joy.
I mean, because like what's been discovered is by building walls around yourself and not being who, if we're not who we really are, which includes exposure to criticism and judgment, then we close ourselves off to the beauty of imperfection, being truly loved and fully expressed. And without the freedom of self-expression, we can become depressed, angry, and limited maybe in our own capacity to love others.
I think when you talk about, depression and anxiety, let's go back to like mental health.
Yeah.
Because I've struggled with it in my life. And as I look back on my struggles with it, it was always like a truth unacknowledged. Like I wasn't living authentically in some way. I was pretending to be something I wasn't. I was people pleasing. I was kind of, like that idea of being a square peg in a round hole, kind of thing. So I just think in these times where we seem to be battling mental health struggles and we're wanting so much to be happy and experience joy more often. I think we really do need to let ourselves be seen and known for who we are, like the truth of us. I think maybe it's one of the most important things we do in our life. I think it's our way back to our true nature, our joyful true nature. I mean,
when you think about being a child and we can, certainly it's hard to talk about vulnerability without talking about the most vulnerable of our species, of our, they're little children. And as children, we are subjected to those criticisms and the judgments, and we learn, sort of what it's all about.
Yeah, and that's true. We learn slowly but surely to hold back or, say the right thing, or don't rock the boat.
Well, and we learn quickly about safety, protection, and security.
Yeah.
And that's like from the get-go, how you're swaddled, how you're cared for, who attends to your crying, and how. And so, of course, as we get older, we begin to intellectualize our pain and suffering, and we give it meaning. And we realize that not everyone likes everyone, and some people are mean, and people can hurt you even if that's not their intention, and outcomes are seldom in your control. And so we, I guess, begin to protect our painful places. So we hide. And no different than a child doesn't want to be scolded or in trouble or blamed.
Yep.
A child who doesn't feel heard, a child who isn't safe to express themselves and isn't comforted or guided through their emotions. I mean, they learn early. And then all that stuff that you learn about the pain of life becomes a choice in terms of how you're going to deal with it. Are you going to hide and pretend you're safe, or are you going to manage those feelings of risk and step out to really live?
Yeah. Right, the old adage, out of the mouths of babes. So we start out our lives unfiltered. Mm-hmm. And we really truly speak our minds, don't we? And we don't really understand that there's consequences or cause and effect or anything like that, right?
Yeah.
We don't have what's called that theory of mind. We don't understand how we affect the world around us. We just say it. Mm-hmm. Or even we just emote, right? Like, amazing that, these children are like just screaming and crying in the grocery store. Like, I want to scream and cry in the grocery store.
I would ignore you. I'd be like, I'm just going to wait. You're just going to ride that out.
Now more than ever. No, do you ever just watch a kid having a temper tantrum or just completely losing it, crying in public, and you're like, no. See, I should be able to do that. I'm an adult with serious problems. I am dealing with a lot of shit right now, kid. I want to be the one crying. But see, then of course we gather this, what's called in the self-help world. We'll get to her, but the armor. We start layering up the armor.
I don't think I'm not screaming and crying in a grocery store aisle because I feel like I don't do that because I've become socialized.
Well, I mean, I think I was exaggerating a little bit, but yeah, it's interesting how they really do just let it all hang out.
Yeah.
It's just interesting that's
sure. And
how we arrive.
I mean, you think about just getting through childhood. So there's the beginning when you can't do anything to communicate except scream, cry, and smile occasionally when you got some gas. But, by the time you hit a certain age, kids are assholes. Kids are like mean to other kids. Like, where does that come from? Is that just like the way we are? Just kids without those filters are mean. And then you go, oh, like someone just made fun of me. I feel like I'm a fool. I can't raise my hand in class. Someone just threw a balled up piece of paper at the back of my head. Like all these things that kids do because they're just being whatever. We're learning to socialize so we don't be those assholes. But the problem is it's probably too late because we've already learned that, people are jerks.
Yeah, as I've learned in my research, this isn't something I know off the top of my head, but the emotion of shame, when we feel shame, that leads to things like bullying. So along the way, I don't know, in a child's life, they start to feel shame. And, they start to hate themselves in some way. And that transcends into a lot of, mean-spiritedness.
I wonder if a child was just given all the love and just got through school and everything with everybody being awesome. Like, I think I said in our self-love episode, I was like, at some point, like at 13, do they go, oh, I hate myself? Like, what's that hair down there? Why do I smell like a sewer? You know what I mean? Like, is it something like, oh, that's just you're going to go through that phase anyway? Yeah.
I think you're going to judge yourself no matter what. But
Nobody gets out unscathed.
I'd love to meet someone who didn't have, some challenges in their childhood. Mm-hmm. Like, I just don't know if we get out of it unscathed.
No,
like, yeah. But I think what tends to mess with the vulnerability is trauma.
Okay.
Okay. Like I think we all have trauma. Of course, we have collective trauma. God knows we have collective trauma now. But, we all carry around trauma. And, just like those past quote unquote setbacks or disappointments, heartbreaks, like I think, what we call baggage, I guess. And so.
Well, when is it baggage? When is it trauma? Heartbreak's just part of life. Are we calling that trauma now?
We need the therapist back for that one. I have no idea.
Like, I just find that we start using these words, mental illness sort of like applies to so many things now. And I'm like, well, what is and what isn't then?
Yes.
And, if everything's trauma, then I don't know if I want to use that language on myself. Like,
Yeah.
I've had my heart broken, but, I don't know if I want to be like, wow, like I've got real trauma. It's like, yeah, it was a heartbreak. That's part of being alive.
That's a really good question. I don't know how we define trauma. Yeah, good one.
I mean, I don't
just
want to
like sitting
say
here
like,
going,
I've got trauma when someone else has been through something that, would maybe in my mind clearly define what trauma might be. And it's like, look, I don't want to steal that thunder. Like,
Yeah.
anyway, it's language, right?
Yeah. I don't. Yeah. Okay. I'm going to stop guessing. But we'll figure that out here.
Well,
along the
even
way.
just in terms of language,
Yeah.
Because it's changing with new perspectives,
Mm-hmm.
new ways, new perspectives. It sounds like we're not talking about vulnerability as a weakness, but an opportunity to build strength and resilience, to be courageous and therefore vulnerable. You know what I mean? It's kind of like one begets the other. You have to, go forth and practice feeling a little bit vulnerable in safe places, with the I love yous or the, I'm sorries. And you try that in safe places so you kind of build up the muscle so you can start daring greatly with it.
Oh, you said it.
Oh, is that a segue?
Daring Greatly by Brene Brown.
You just
Oh,
flushed.
listen, I've got a full-on crush going on. I've been researching Brene. I've read Brene over the years, but I've been researching her for this episode, and I'm watching the videos, and I'm listening to like her being interviewed on podcasts, and I'm skimming through my Daring Greatly, and I'm just like, wow, like I think I would.
You
Yep.
okay.
Okay, we'll move on. But
Great.
no, I just
yeah, she's funny and she's so smart and she's wise and she's got big earrings.
But she really truly is the reason we have more understanding and more language around vulnerability.
Well, she's all over it. I mean, when I went to take a look at, other sides of vulnerability, I just kept coming in with her name. It was like, Brene, get out of the way. I'm trying to find some other perspectives here.
I think that's one of the reasons her work has caught fire is because it's uncharted territory. I think she, got up at that TEDx Houston event many years ago and blew their minds because she really was talking about a topic that hadn't really been unearthed before to that degree anyway.
I think even, where I started with vulnerability being associated with weakness, I think that what she did is she really, she did the research on emotional vulnerability because there are different kinds of vulnerability. And I would say hers is emotionally focused.
Yeah. I guess it's best to describe it as a human behavior. As she calls it, it's a constant choice. She does say, she went on record to say, I don't know what it was, a podcast or a video, that it's not like, you're vulnerable and I'm not. Like, it's not like some people are and some people aren't. It is really just that, that habit we can create in our lives. It's a choice we make. So you might choose it more often than I do, or whatever, vice versa. But it's not like you're wired for it or you aren't. It's a choice.
What I thought was most interesting about her talk on vulnerability, because I remember it and it just happened to come along at a time when I really needed it. What surprised me was when she said, if you are shutting vulnerability down in some area of your life, you're most likely shutting it down everywhere. Is that what she meant?
I think maybe you're referring to if you're numbing the the pain in your life, right? So okay, I'm not going to be vulnerable because that's hard, and so I'm just gonna I'm gonna numb that pain. well, then you're numbing all the positive emotions as well. So if you're numbing, those tougher emotions, that's also going to, numb your experiences with, more of the quote unquote positive emotions, like, like joy. So maybe that's what
I'm not sure.
Is that what you were remembering?
I remember going, I know where I'm shutting it down. I know where I don't feel safe.
Yes.
And therefore I was like, no vulnerability over there. Thank you.
Yeah.
Like I'm going to protect that little area of my heart. But then after listening to that TED Talk, I was like, is there anywhere else that I'm doing that then?
Mm-hmm.
And I was like, it's showing up in a few places. So I was like, maybe that's what she means, is if you're kind of doing it over there, you're maybe doing it everywhere. I really wasn't totally clear on that, but my own experience was, yes, I'm definitely protecting my heart, and it's showing up in other places.
Oh, sure. I think it can show up in professional settings, and it can show up in our personal lives. It can show up in friendships. It can show up everywhere.
And I guess what she's saying, and what people are talking about in terms of vulnerability, is you just have to choose it. And to choose it, she, I think, calls it daring greatly, but that it involves some courage, because it's that very uncomfortable feeling, that fear of the unknown, that being somewhere you haven't been before, like the first time you tell someone you love them, or trying something new, or, apologizing even, coming to someone to ask for forgiveness. Those are areas where you may feel you're very vulnerable, open to someone else's criticism or, reaction.
Sure. I mean, I've learned from her work that you cannot have vulnerability without being brave or being courageous. I'll just kind of, there's going to be times maybe I'll be paraphrasing Brene, but then there's going to be times where I'm actually quoting her. So
I think she said so damn much about it. It's impossible not to talk about it without someone going, oh, Brene Brown said that.
Sure.
It's like, okay.
So, and I heard this said many times as I was researching, it's the willingness to show up and be seen when you can't control the outcome. It's the emotion we experience during times of uncertainty, risk, and emotional exposure. And as she states, this is all so important to practice, because vulnerability is the gateway to connection.
Right.
And connection gives us meaning and purpose in life. It's why we're here. As she says, we're neurobiologically wired for connection. For connection to exist in our lives, we need to have the courage to be seen, really seen, which is vulnerability.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. I mean, you could just, run across a football field with no clothes on. You're going to be seen.
That is...
that's fully seen.
That is, I guess, a perfect example of it.
Of courage.
And probably drunkenness. But yeah, that's a physical example, like when we're exposed. Because, there it is. That's you for real.
I'm not calling a flasher brave. That's for sure. Put that away.
That goes into the category of insane, but
yeah,
I mean, that's a good image to hold in your mind.
What, the flasher?
Sure. Or just standing there, right? Naked.
Right.
That horrible dream we have about being naked in situations where that's not appropriate.
Right.
And that's metaphorically.
And everybody's pointing and laughing.
Yeah. Metaphorically, that's what we're doing when we're having like that hard conversation with someone where we're saying sorry.
Yeah.
That kind of thing. So what I've learned is it's not, so vulnerability is not oversharing. Okay. It's not about just spilling your guts.
Oh no, that's too much information.
in a meeting, or, in a situation where it's not conducive.
I think that's a great point, because I think there are some people who just it's just verbal diarrhea. It's just like out, it's coming. And it's like, no. That's not creating connection. That's just you dumping out.
That's what Brene calls floodlighting people.
Okay.
Just they sit there with their
Wide-eyed.
eyes. Exactly. Because the lights are so bright. And you're just, like, oh my God, I can't believe she's telling me this right now. Right here in this situation. And so Brene actually says that even when it comes to her being open with people, like even on stage, telling stories, when she's keynoting, she doesn't talk anything that's like overly intimate. and she doesn't talk from a place of fresh wounds.
Oh,
So
yeah.
basically, if she hasn't worked through it with her family or her partner,
Yep.
her husband, or if she isn't grounded in it,
Mm-hmm.
that's oversharing and that's irresponsible. And like you said, it doesn't create connection.
Right.
You're going to repel people.
Yeah.
You're like, okay, girl, thanks for sharing.
Yeah.
Yeah. So it's not oversharing. It's not crying. Like
Oh.
you could tear up when you're being vulnerable with someone, but it's not like, you know.
Did she say that? Did
Yeah.
she say it's not crying?
So what she says is that
I think some people need to just, let some tears out and share something with their partner or their friend. And I would never say, hey, man, you can talk, but
Yeah.
put the tears away. Like, that's just honest emotion. I mean, unless you're putting the crocodile tears to manipulate, but otherwise, feel the feels.
I think she is saying that, like, because I think a lot of people get their back up with this idea of like, oh, so what you're asking me to do is to just start crying with my boss when I'm upset, right? So it's like, oh, she's saying, oh, no, you don't have to get to that point to be vulnerable with your boss or your colleague or anyone. Like you might find yourself crying in a situation when you are choosing to be
She's
vulnerable.
just trying to head something off at the pass. She's
exactly.
Going, I
She's
know
like-
you guys out there, the people who are like, oh, does that mean I got to cry all over?
Exactly.
Okay, fine.
Yeah,
All right.
that's all. She's just kind of saying, hey, it's kind of like you were saying some great examples there about just having open, honest conversations. It's about like sharing an unpopular opinion, standing up for yourself. Like that's scary sometimes, isn't it?
You know when you get pulled over and you're like, I'm so sorry, officer. I just, like, is that allowed? Is that when crying is allowed in a vulnerable situation?
I wonder if that's a little floodlighting because then the officer is standing there
Probably.
going, oh dear.
No, he's seeing right through it. He's not oh dearing at all. He's like, oh dear. Yes.
Yeah, we got another one.
I don't think I bet you that doesn't even work anymore. Time's gone by. I think they're hip to the.
Yeah, that's true. We're not ahead of the audience there anymore. Another thing, like I would say providing honest feedback, that can be very tough, right? Like when you're like, I got to say this rather than pretend everything is fine. It's being accountable when you mess up or hurt someone. It's admitting that you were wrong. It's about getting back up after failure. It's putting up boundaries and saying no rather than doing that old people pleasing act. It's exercising in public. Hey, a lot of people are afraid of
exercising in public.
Absolutely, that's a
Like,
thing.
what do you mean?
Like going to a group fitness class? Not that that's really an option right now.
like
but
in places where you're expected to. Not that you're like in the middle of a lecture at school and
No,
you
like,
decide to
I
stretch it out,
I think there is
which
a
would be fine.
large population of people who exercise at home or on a Peloton or whatever because they don't want to be seen at a gym or in any kind of public forum. I think that is definitely a thing. It's admitting that
we're just saying that's fear of being judged, and the remedy to that is courage in your vulnerability and get out there if that's what you want to do. Is that what that's about?
Yeah, I would say, choosing to put yourself out there and be exposed in your, flopping around and sweating. Yeah, that's vulnerability. That's a major act of courage.
So the next time I see somebody like really just flopping around, I can be like, that's very vulnerable.
Yeah, that's
Really?
that's a I think a courageous act if that makes you afraid.
Yeah.
I mean, dare I say
I'm
maybe
all for it. Like, I'm just like, yeah.
maybe
like,
all of us
I think it's
flopping around
let's
and
talk
sweating.
about the people who are judging that stuff.
Well, sure, that's the critic who she says doesn't count.
No,
Yeah.
so like it goes both ways. When I think about, having a tough conversation, or even more specifically, like I'll refer to my job as a writer, like when I submit stuff or if I'm working with a writing partner, if I'm getting writing notes, now there are like techniques in giving notes because it's a very vulnerable place to be in when you're like, here's everything I made. And, usually people who don't understand that that's, a very vulnerable place to come from. They're like, oh, well, I don't like this and I don't like that. And now people are being taught, like, first you say what you liked. You can talk about what you maybe aren't getting yet. Like,
Yep.
there are things you do to show that, You have a heart.
Being a writer, being an actor, being a comedian,
All of it.
being a podcaster is incredibly vulnerable,
Yeah.
right? We're just putting our ideas
the
out there.
time.
And of course, we're leaving ourselves open for criticism or judgment
Yeah.
or anything like that. Like,
Yeah.
we're choosing to be brave
Yeah.
a lot of times when
Pretty
it comes
much
to
all the time.
when it comes to creative endeavors and the performing arts.
Yeah.
But I think it's cool that there's such a long list of examples. Like, it's really just about putting yourself out there when staying small and kind of hiding away could be so easy.
Sure. And I think that humans want to see the face of truth in other humans, like it gives us strength and hope and inspiration when we see it, like the courage to do the same. And at the very least, it begins with helping others feel less alone, I think, when you're, putting yourself out there like that. And the reward for, let's say, revealing your true self is the return on the investment because you'll feel less alone as a result.
Brene talks about vulnerability being contagious.
Mm-hmm.
And so she wrote Dare to Lead, really encouraging courage in leadership.
Mm-hmm.
So making it a workplace culture, like, hey, if you are willing to have the tough conversations and express honest feedback to your team members and step into the arena, as she calls it, then you'll see it then reflected back to you by the team.
Mm-hmm.
So she's like, let's kind of choose vulnerability to exist at the top. Let's create this culture. Let's make it safe for people to show themselves, in that figurative sense, hopefully.
This requires a shift from everybody.
Yes, that's it. Like, I think, the Call to Courage, that Netflix special.
Yep.
I think Netflix really just acknowledged that it is a major culture shift, and what better way to reach the masses than a Netflix special.
Right.
Right. So, like,
That's true.
we're only going to be okay with vulnerability if I see you doing it and I see other people. Like, it is like, I think there's a safety in a mass shift in consciousness.
Well, her research showed that we judge ourselves more harshly when we're out there exposed to the world for who we really are than we are actually being judged by those who are watching. So, like, by the way, that doesn't mean you're not being judged.
Let's be very clear.
It's just not as bad as, like you're the best, meanest, cruelest judge of you out there. So that's sort of a given, is like we judge ourselves harshly, but either way, judged or, a little bit judged by others, you have to have the courage to stand and be who you are. And the truth is, authenticity is celebrated. This is why we're encouraged to like ourselves, because if you're busy categorizing yourself as bad, ugly, or worthless, you wouldn't possibly risk exposure. But the truth is, you're none of those things.
Yeah, you make a good point. I think I almost see it as the foundation of vulnerability is your relationship with yourself.
Sure. Yeah.
So she wrote The Gifts of Our Imperfection very early on in her career. I think it was her second book. And I think it was important that she wrote it early on to say, okay, yeah, here's the place we come from. If we're okay with ourselves, if we truly accept our light and our dark and our imperfections, then I think we're going to be more willing to allow people to see us and hear us. I think if you're not right with yourself, you're going to be pretty guarded.
Yeah. And I think that, if you're someone who's like, I keep hearing this vulnerability thing, it's supposed to make me feel great if I'm doing it. How do I do it? And it's like, well, there is, sort of like you just do. But then there's also like, it might be a multiple step process. Like, if you're not good with you, then it's going to be difficult to feel safe in your in being yourself with others. So, how do you get to that first would be the question.
Well, I think as I've learned from Brene is I think you kind of got to go there. You got to deal with your shame. Like, I think shame is the biggest or the most prevalent emotion that prevents us from choosing to be vulnerable.
Okay. I mean, I do think we feel naturally vulnerable. I do think it's a normal thing.
Oh, I think so.
I don't think you have to have some it doesn't have to be just that shame place, where things are like, oh, that's really bad. Until I can tell the world this shameful thing that I, feel or that happened to me or whatever, I'll never be vulnerable. I don't think that's true. I think that it can be baby steps. Like I said, start small, go, say nice things and make apologies in small ways to like people you trust and just build up the resilience or the, whatever to it. But like, it's a bit like we're talking about emotional vulnerability, but if you think about physical vulnerability, if I've sprained my ankle and someone says to me, hey, let's go for a run, I'm gonna be like, it's probably not a good idea because I'm just gonna subject myself to like more pain and make this problem worse.
Yeah.
I kind of need to heal this before I get out there. So with emotional vulnerability, finding the courage to be yourself, at the very least express yourself, you'll build up the resilience to be vulnerable. So is it like strengthening a muscle or like healing a little injury? You know what I mean? Like you got to sort of look at those things that way and go, okay, what do I need here to have some strength in that area or to some courage to stand on that foot?
Yeah. So Brene points out that just being aware that shame might be creeping in here, like just kind of having that on your radar, just being a little bit more self-aware of like, okay, what could I kind of be feeling shame about right now that's getting in the way of me making that tough phone call or having that, providing that feedback, just going, okay, what's going on here? And so she says,
usually just the other person's reaction, man.
Well, sure. And what is preventing you from facing, that person's reaction? So yeah, she has these kind of like 4 pillars of shame resilience, right? So she's like, let's not talk about shame resistance. This isn't about getting rid of shame because as we've come to understand, we can't get rid of our emotions. No,
we got to be able to do stuff anyway.
Yeah. Okay. So she, the first one is recognizing shame and understanding its triggers. So can you notice when you're in the grips of shame and what expectations triggered it?
So that's your first question and go yes or no. Like some people might be like, I don't know. Is this shame I'm dealing with? Or like some people may not even understand that.
Yeah. Just going, okay. So
I think if you really want to hide it, if it's the thing that you think if people knew this, I would explode. I would I would cease to be. I would drop dead.
Yeah.
I would, like life as I know it would be over. That's probably somewhere where you're feeling shame.
Shame thrives on your fear of what people are going to think. Like that's like the food for shame. But anyway, so we've got also.
No, but I mean, if I get up in front of a crowd and I, like want to tell jokes or if I want to.
Oh, I don't recommend it.
No. I've done. But, if that's what I want to do, then it's not so much shame I'm dealing with. It's like just fear of being criticized, ostracized, made fun of, booed, whatever. Right.
Yeah.
That's different than shame where like, I don't want anyone to know this. Is that not a different thing? Like if both situations seem vulnerable, that an area of shame, if I were to reveal it to even just one person, I would feel, I would be so afraid to do that as opposed to like standing up, telling jokes and being like, yeah, this could really hurt, because people aren't going to laugh.
I guess it's all in what you interpret in terms of like maybe the outcome you don't want. Like if you don't have the greatest set, okay, if you're a stand-up comedian.
Yeah.
And do you get off stage and going and saying, oh, that was a tough show? Or do you say, I'm a shitty comedian?
I think it depends on who you are.
Yeah.
I certainly have seen both.
So if you're going to come away from a tough show saying, I'm a shitty comedian or I suck, I'm terrible at this. Okay, so that's shame. Okay. So there's different, I can clarify it a little bit better in another context, but guilt and shame are 2 different things.
For sure.
So when we kind of attach the I to something, then that's shame. So maybe stand-up would scare the shit out of you if you're going to get off stage and think that you're just a terrible performer, a terrible person. If things
Even
don't
worse,
go well.
if you get off and go, that audience sucks. Like it's got to be somewhere in the middle, right? You can't always blame the audience because eventually you got to look inside and go, maybe the jokes aren't working because I suck.
Yeah.
I got to fix them.
Yeah. Personally, I would say when I realized that it was a tough audience, I probably go, oh God, and how could I have made it better? But anyway, it's a double whammy, that's for sure. They hated me, and I hate myself.
Right. See, there it is.
Anyway, another one is practicing critical awareness. Can you reality check the messages and expectations that are driving your shame? Are they realistic? Are they attainable? So I don't know. Do you get on stage and make that assumption or that expectation that you're going to be a great stand-up comic, even though you've only had a few shows, like that you've only been at it for a year or so? Like you got to kind of reality check your expectations.
Yeah, I think that's self-awareness.
Yeah.
I don't know if the lack of self-awareness means like how that relates to shame. I don't know. I'm really confused right now.
What I'm saying is like, if you're thinking, oh my God, I'm a terrible comic if this doesn't go well, maybe just reality check yourself. You've only been at this for a few months or even a few years. It takes a long time to be really great at it. So with your shame, is it even realistic?
Right. Is it true?
Or, are you carrying around this massive expectation for yourself? Like, go easy on yourself.
Right.
Right. So there's that self-love, self-compassion piece right there.
Yeah.
The next one is reaching out. Are you owning and sharing your story? We can experience empathy by connecting. So it's really just about like normalizing. It's about just like getting it out there, talking to someone rather than shame loves secrecy, as I've learned from Brene. It loves just getting, hidden away. And, the more you don't talk about it, the stronger it gets. And the last one is speaking about it more openly. Are you talking about how you feel and asking for what you need when you feel shame? So anyway, that's her 4 steps for more resiliency when it comes to that emotion. Like you said, it's not going away. It's just how do we manage it when it creeps up and maybe prevents us from putting ourselves out there?
Yeah, I mean, I certainly hope that, me, I think everything starts with, those first few years of life.
Yeah, sure.
And I remember not knowing that it was called vulnerability necessarily.
Yeah.
But, my mom taught me, especially, I recall like having animals around. Like we had, the family dog, but we had birds that used to fly into our like big bay window in the backyard because there was a forest behind us. And so birds flew in there a fair bit. And my mom would go out and, we started to care for these birds and sort of get them, shake it off and away you go. And in like many areas like that, she would show me something about vulnerability and the care associated with, helping a creature that's like weaker or that, like I think there's ways that you can teach children to be empathetic with that and see that in other people.
Yep.
To understand it and then make other people's lives a little easier because you're not attacking a vulnerable situation or vulnerability in someone, that you see it and you can work with it.
Brene's research has found that the kinder you are to yourself, the kinder you will be to others.
Sure. Yeah.
It's
makes sense.
It's kind of a scary correlation between, your relationship with yourself and then of course, how you respond to the external world and respond to others.
Yeah. I mean, if you're talking shit to yourself all the time, then you're probably thinking that about other people. I mean, a lot of people would say, I'm far worse to myself than I am to others. That's fine.
Yeah.
But, still recognize.
Yeah. I would be interested to know if that person demonstrates a lot of empathy or compassion or kindness or gentleness to people. Like, yes, you might be really, really, really hard on yourself. And then you're probably just like pretty hard on everyone else. Like, you know what I mean? Like you're not
by comparison.
Yeah. You're not out there, dishing out the light and love if you are dwelling in self-loathing.
Right.
So, I think it is important to recognize that this isn't about fearlessness though. Like,
no.
Yeah. I sometimes I get concerned about the self-help world or the self-improvement movement, this talk about being.
I'm always concerned.
Well, you're always concerned, and I'm definitely growing in my concern.
Yeah.
But there is this idea, this concept of being fearless.
Yeah.
Okay. You can even see it on like those memes and social media,
Oh, I had a teacher who used to say, "Oh, fearless Fanson."
Yeah.
And I was like, I think that's supposed to make me feel good, but it actually didn't, because I wanted to I really felt like actually I am kind of scared shitless, but I just do it anyway.
There it is.
That's courage.
That's courage.
So I'd rather be called Courage Kelly than Fearless Fanson.
It's funny, when Brene started doing her research and writing, she thought being courageous and being vulnerable was due to the absence of fear. She really did.
Right.
She thought, okay, this is about tackling fear and being fearless. And now with more research, she now understands that it's being brave and afraid at the same time. And I just think that's so important to remember, that this is about being brave and afraid at the same time. Most times when we're vulnerable, we're scared. We are.
Yeah.
Right? Like, making that phone call or having that conversation or whatever you want, making the apology, that, you're going to be a bit scared.
There's a quivering there.
Sure.
For sure.
But the choice that we make, or that we can make, is to step into that arena. So just don't let the self-help industry or the self-improvement movement lure you into this idea of being fearless. Again, fear is an emotion.
Yeah.
And so it's not going anywhere. The realistic goal is to aim for courage, right? Feel the fear, but then do that scary thing anyway. And so she calls people who live like this wholehearted. Mm-hmm. So she researched, she had interviews with people that, practice this idea of being brave and afraid at the same time. And so she termed it wholehearted living. Mm-hmm. I love that. I don't know.
Yeah.
It's like, that's cool.
I always think about those people who are like, how do I do it, guys? How do I do it? And it's like, I don't know. Just like, you don't have to go jump off a cliff with a, bat suit on. You can just start in little ways by expressing yourself in, some safe areas. And if you get a reaction that doesn't feel great, practice being okay with that and standing just for yourself.
And again, I think it just starts with being okay with who you are, like really truly accepting and loving yourself.
Even if you're not okay with who you are, you can extend yourself, express yourself to others, and build that muscle a little bit.
Yeah, I think Brene's research has just proven that it gets easier if you're not tying your worthiness into how the conversation goes.
A good example of that would be being a parent.
Okay.
So for me, I remember there were some times where my younger son and I would just get into it. Mm-hmm. And not every time, I wasn't perfect every time, there were times I was blowing up with frustration. And one of the areas where I felt most vulnerable was after, right? It's not necessarily when you're in it, but after, being able to look at it and go, you know what? I need to say, hey, I'm sorry about that. That saying sorry doesn't mean it's all clear. None of that counts.
Right.
But as a parent, I think it's really important that we recognize those moments where we don't always have to be right and stay powerful or stay, that we're the ones in charge, and, that we can't learn something from them, to be able to go and say, hey, sorry about that. I just want to say that was just me feeling a little helpless, a little hopeless, that's how it came out. And here's what I want to do about it, or whatever. And how are you doing? I just think parenting is one of those areas where it's really important to remember your vulnerability in that way of kindness with your kids, so they can recognize what it looks like and what it feels like, and that the world doesn't swallow you up when you say, hey, that I just want to take accountability for that one. That's very powerful to a kid.
That's leading by example there. That's
right.
Daring greatly as a leader. Mm-hmm. So again, to Brene's point, if we do it at the top, if you want to call the parent, at the top of the ladder, then you're basically giving your children permission to then be vulnerable in situations with you and to others.
And even
again, creating
with
that culture.
And even with your partner, whether it's any kind of relationship, actually, if you've sort of maintained an attitude of being right, I think you just have to ask yourself, how do I feel about me?
Yep.
holding on to that right now? Like, do
Yeah.
I feel like that's a win? Is there something that doesn't really, feel good about it? Because I should feel good. I'm right. Like I won that one or whatever.
Yeah.
But to be able to say, okay, hold on a sec. If I just go for what's kind and
Yeah.
just go for that connection,
Yeah.
then, it's never too late to approach someone you love or like, and say, I just want to say, this is how I'm feeling about that.
Yep.
Like, I feel like, oh, I kind of wanted to take a win there, or I'm kind of feeling like I'm right, but it makes me feel kind of like we're losing a connection because of it, or something meaningful between us. And I want to address that. And
Yep.
that's vulnerability. That's, approaching in a situation where you feel like you're going to like put yourself down a few rungs. You know what I mean? Like
Yeah.
that feeling of like, oh, I got to come at it. Like, no, you don't. You actually can stand in who you are and meet it head on with kindness.
Yeah, there's no scoreboard because if you have this inherent feeling of loving and belonging, okay, and knowing that you are enough no matter what happens, that is the wholehearted living she's talking about. The opposite of wholehearted living is hustling for your worthiness, right? So getting out your scorecard and making sure you got the wins, maybe winning at all costs. And so again, we go back to probably the foundation is, how do you feel about yourself?
Yeah. I mean, I think that's really all I'm
do you-
referring to.
yeah.
I'm also like, hey man, win.
No,
Okay.
yeah. Yeah.
Definitely win.
Hey.
But just how do you feel about your connection with the person or persons that, that situation arose with? Like, just, I think about the asking for forgiveness being a real vulnerable area. Just as an example.
Totally.
I mean, the I love yous, like that moment when you first tell someone.
Yep.
There's a great example of just like, wow, like it's so meaningful. It's so powerful. And if that person looks at you and goes, not so much, can you handle it?
Yeah. And you'll choose to do it more if you really have that strong belief that you're enough, no matter if he or she says it back or not.
Yeah,
And
like I think
know,
if you really want to hear it,
I
then
know.
that can be really tough. I mean, I know some people who say I love you to everybody, and I'm like, I think that's great. People love to hear that you love them, kind of thing. But I don't do that. Like
Neither do I.
I'm more like when I'm like I
don't say it a lot. I don't. Sometimes I wonder if the person who's saying it a lot is almost like
did they mean it?
Pretending to be something they're not. It doesn't actually come off to me as authentic. When it's just being tossed around.
Yeah, like because it doesn't
like hello and goodbye. I don't know.
But then maybe we should. I just should myself.
You're shooting yourself over there.
We should love everybody. Right? So it depends what kind of, maybe we're talking about like, hey, I love you, man. I love you and I love you and I love you. I love all of you. Right? As opposed to like, my heart is so invested in this love feeling that I have for you that it almost feels risky that you don't love me. That it feels risky saying it in case you don't love me. Like even every day, I think, you have a partner, a relationship in life. And I think there's always this like little tiny fear in there. Like one day they could just be like, oh, I changed my mind.
And there goes your worthiness
And
right out the
there
window.
goes it all, right?
Damn it. I
Damn
hate
it.
myself. So daring greatly. It's probably, I'll just speak as a junkie, if you're really interested in doing the deep dive into the subject of vulnerability in like yourself and what it leads to in life, what prevents it, all that kind of thing. Yeah, that's the book you want to read, Daring Greatly. And I would like to share the inspiration for the title because I think it's just so beautiful. I think it was at one point before she wrote the book, she came across Teddy Roosevelt's famous quote. And it's all about, getting out into the arena. So here's the quote that inspired the title Daring Greatly. It is not the critic who counts, not the man who points out how the strong man stumbles or where the doer of deeds could have done them better. The credit belongs to the man who is actually in the arena, whose face is marred by dust and sweat and blood, who strives valiantly, who errs, who comes short again and again, who at the best knows in the end the triumph of high achievement, and who at the worst, if he fails, at least fails while daring greatly. I just, got
Make it worth it.
little goosebumps there.
Yeah.
It's
That's
just,
beautiful.
you know? So, I mean, you think about all the
Do you
different
feel
ways.
dusty and marred and
Lots of times.
Lots.
But even recently, I was kind of sort of auditioning to host this online conference. This all happened kind of earlier in the fall, and it was an all-day conference, and the scope of the contract was going to be pretty lengthy in terms of prep, and then of course being online, on for like 8 hours. And so I went through several Zoom calls that were like interviews, auditions kind of thing. They presented the fee, their budget, what they could pay me was lower than I usually am paid. But it's COVID, and I'm thinking to myself, maybe I should take it, even though it's a lot of work for not the kind of the fee that I would prefer, the standard in the industry anyway. And so I agreed. I said, okay, that fee will work, even though deep down I didn't really feel good about it. Anyway, so then there was a bit more interviewing, and anyway, there was a lot of Zoom calls. I finally get the email that I got the host role, like
congratulations.
I got the job. And I sat there, and I looked at the email, and I realized I'd rather stick a fork in my eye repeatedly all day long than host this conference.
Wow.
I just they shoved in another ask. They're like, congratulations, you're the host of this conference, and now you have to go around Toronto and shoot promo videos and whatever. And I'm like, oh no, see, you didn't mention that I was going to be doing that when I asked for the scope of the contract when it came to the fee.
Yeah, that's
right. I was just like,
that's dirty pool.
So what we call that is scope creep.
Yeah.
And I'm like, you know what? I have a feeling this is going to be a big drain for not enough pay. And I'm also realizing that it was a tech conference, and I'm just not really moved by tech per se, that industry. I mean, I appreciate it on some level.
What?
I know. The self-help
Filled
junkie.
with so much drama.
Well, I mean, it's just not actually about people enough.
No.
Even though I know tech is about people, it's not about people enough for me.
Got it.
Anyway, so I'm sitting there with the email going, I don't want to do it. And I have just sat on Zoom how many times I have agreed to the fee, not in a contractual way, but I wrote to them in an email and said, okay. So into the arena I went.
Oh boy.
And I had the hard email conversation. See, I didn't show up fully. What I really needed to do was sit on Zoom or have a phone call with them and explain why I've decided not to. So I only showed up halfway. I wrote them an email and told them that my heart wasn't in it. It was really, really uncomfortable. They wrote back and said, hey, can we work this out? And then I had to write back again and go, no, right? It's not you, it's me. Like I got the email saying I got the job and I wasn't excited. And I think that's really, really important.
And you should probably have someone who is.
This project deserves someone
Yeah.
that's really, really into it. It was tough. But like I said, I don't think I really showed up in that moment. I took the easy way out with email because I was afraid to sit on Zoom and actually look at her and have that conversation.
So you think that was vulnerability?
Yep.
That was a lack of vulnerability.
I think so. I think I took the easy way out. I think the ideal situation is I would have handled it the way that they had been handling it the whole time, and that was meeting on Zoom.
Okay.
I don't know.
That's interesting that you look at that as a lack of vulnerability. I think some people, there's a lot of things you might call that moment.
I give myself a check mark for not taking the job when it is money in COVID times. So I am choosing to be authentic, to a degree, and saying, okay, my heart's not in it, so let's not do this. But then I think I fell short.
Okay. All right.
I don't know. That's my little self-analysis from a vulnerability.
You are absolved.
Thanks, Vanson.
I got to say, like, vulnerability in my acting and writing can often feel like walking around without skin.
Sure.
It can sometimes be quite almost painful, like there's the dropping of the filters and the allowing the truth of moments to come out, whether it's on the page or on camera. it's different every time, but something has to show up in order to do that. And, you know, I teach my students one of the first rules of being an actor is to react and act truthfully, to let go of the idea of being polite in their work so the truth has a chance to find the light of day. And by being truthful, they offer a gift and an opportunity to their scene partner or partners, because we know truth when we hear it and when we see it. And that truth inspires us and challenges us to reveal our own. So I always, you know, say there's lots of things you can do as an actor, learn your lines and all that stuff, but you have to show up with the truth. That's a difference maker. And that takes guts, that takes exposure, that takes vulnerability to do that.
Yeah. Do you feel a little bit safer that you enter into a character, though? Is that like a little bit of a safety net for an actor going, well, at least I'm in a character that makes it a bit safer? Would you say it's a little bit of an armor?
Here's what I know about that. This is the limited, I'm not going to call it limited. Here's what I know about that.
Yeah.
I think it depends on the actor.
Yeah.
There are some people who feel much safer hidden behind a character, like, you know, someone very unlike themselves. I was even reading about Sacha Baron Cohen just the other day, a New York Times article, I think it was, and just how much more comfortable he was to do what he was doing behind Borat. Right?
Yep.
So, and he takes enormous risks, like,
yes,
valiant risks. I want to be him. But I don't think that applies to every actor. I feel very comfortable just finding what's inside me and not being a character very different than myself.
Yeah.
But I also know that I have a lot of fun, you know, when it's someone very different, when it's characteristics that are not my own or that I'm creating. So I do think it depends on the actor.
So just to summarize what Brené's research has presented to us, the emotion that prevents vulnerability the most is shame.
Okay.
And fear. Those are the two emotions. But then she also offers up these kind of pieces of armor, you know, the way that we shield ourselves from vulnerability, protect ourselves from being seen or, you know, fully known. So I just thought I would touch on that. So the first,
can I just say the shame and the fear, I think that's great, because we actually did sort of give two examples. I think that when I brought up being on stage, and the fear associated with that's not necessarily the shame category. That's just like the fear of the unknown and the being ridiculed and criticized, right? As opposed to the shame that says, I must hide this from the world. You know, because I'll break if I say this. You know?
That's true. I think maybe I was trying to connect the fear to the shame, and maybe that was maybe a stretch.
Like all things, I think that they could be connected, but there's also a difference between the two. So,
I should also maybe right now just do a meta feeling alert.
Okay,
let's do a meta feeling alert, because Brené's work might cause you to feel like shit for feeling shame.
Hey, by the way, check out our meta feelings episode.
Do a deep dive. It's a great episode. It really does.
That was the drinking game episode, wasn't it?
That's right.
Yep.
So like we discussed with Dr. Julia MacArthur, all emotions are valid and important, and some might be hard to deal with, but none are quote unquote negative and therefore important to delete.
Just how you
from your
manage
emotional repertoire, right? So it's not about getting rid of shame or even fear. It's not realistic. Shame is universal and one of the most primitive human emotions that we experience. As Brené says, fess up to shame or admit that you're a sociopath.
No, those are your options?
Fess up to shame or admit that you're a sociopath.
Just fess up that you have shame, or like reveal to the world your shame. Does everybody have to write a book? Does every single person have to write their damn self-help book going, this is what I did and this is how I, you know, made my life better?
I think
that's where I'm like, come on.
There's enough self-help books.
Seriously.
I don't think we need that many more.
We really don't.
I can't read them all.
There are so many you could read for the rest of your life, and we wouldn't need another self-help book. I mean, like a memoir self-help book, in case you haven't been listening for the last 20 episodes.
So let's just not hate ourselves for feeling shame, even though like we want to be more vulnerable. We want to, you know, be more brave in the world. Let's not Like the moment when shame creeps in and maybe even takes over, and we don't, maybe we don't go on Zoom and talk to those clients. All right, that's not an invitation to judge yourself and then dwell in self-loathing. Go, okay, shame did that. Okay, and that's my emotions. Right, like move on. Like let's just not. So meta feeling alert, because I think Brene could lead to a lot of, like, you can almost feel like ashamed for dealing with your shame.
Sure.
I think that's important. I don't know. All right. So the armor, just quickly, the armor that we sometimes wear that prevents us from being vulnerable because we're protecting ourselves. She talks about numbing. Okay. So, God, you think about all the things that we do to just kind of like avoid those hard feelings. Right? I mean, there's of course drinking and drugs. Those are probably our two favorites. But like there's even just being busy.
Sure.
She has actually gone on record to say that people just running around constantly doing something.
I mean, if you're doing all of that constantly to feel nothing,
Yep.
then okay, we got a problem. If you are like, I'm just not going to have the negative feeling right now, I'm going to go for a run. Go for a run, man. Like, you don't have to dive into your negative feelings. The point is, feelings are going to occur and there's no benefit to shutting a feeling down. Let's say, in terms of the self-help stuff we're talking about, all this positivity and never feel negative. Well, you never feel anger. Well, okay, what? Like that's madness.
I think there's healthy forms of numbing. I think exercise is
I don't even, if you want to call it numbing, just like, hey, change your mind. You're allowed. It's your prerogative.
There's lots of people who will go out for a run or go to the gym when they're feeling certain hard feelings, though.
And sure, and if you've got like a negative feeling going on, it doesn't mean you got to tell the world. It means give it some time and it'll probably pass. But you don't have to like feel bad for feeling sad or for feeling upset or angry.
Oh yeah, no. I say go to the gym. Like if that's going to kind of
like go get an ice cream. I don't care.
What she's just saying is if you're choosing not to just kind of lean in and sit in the hard feeling and you go out for the run, it's just a form of numbing.
It's if you never stop running. Come on, Forrest Gump.
So it's just, it's just interesting to note that things like, overspending or overeating, overscheduling yourself is just a way of kind of like not taking a look at your life or facing those harder feelings.
Yeah.
So maybe like numbing is a hard word to associate. You're like, I'm not numbing. Well, it is a way of just not feeling what you're feeling in that moment. And you're like, I'm going to go for a walk. I'm going to have some Pinot Grigio. Right? Like, it's just a way of just kind of like...
Some things are healthy choices. It's just to get yourself out of your own way. And other things can become chronic problems.
But sorry, we did that together.
We did.
I just want to circle back to that thing that we were talking about. Her research has proven you can't selectively numb emotions. You can't take the hard ones, fear, grief, shame, disappointment, without numbing the other ones.
Well, I think that's what I meant by the vulnerability thing.
Yeah, we numb joy, gratitude, and happiness. So it's not like, unfortunately, it's not okay, I'm going to just like pick this one and this one and this one. No, apparently it's like kind of like an all or nothing.
Okay, so here's what I do want to say,
truth.
this one final thing about vulnerability for anybody who's still like, come on, like, isn't there enough of this?
Come on.
Like, show your soft, weak spots in the world. Vulnerability must be met with empathy, right? Like, don't all these things have to happen kind of at the same time? Like, do you want to be like, here I am, and here's my true self, when it's going to be met with like, you're ugly and stupid, like, how do you tell somebody who is in that sort of situation in their lives to keep being vulnerable? I mean, I guess ultimately you got to choose the people who can hear you, see you, and treat you with respect and understanding, because your choice is to be yourself and be vulnerable. I certainly know that I have had relationships in my life, I'll call them relationships as I do, when, I want to extend myself whether it's in an apology or, I think it's usually in a situation where I'm like, hey, sorry about that, or I want to talk to you about something.
Yeah.
And it's not met with anything but either contempt or defensiveness or, whatever negativity coming back. And it's like, to keep choosing that is exhausting. And it certainly doesn't get me excited to be vulnerable with that person. It actually does the opposite. And then I learn this is not the place to go to have a real connection. So I think it's recognizing that, because I certainly in my relationship now and in my relationship with my parents, there are relationships in my life where it's like, I go there, I can say anything and it's cool. It's like, we got this,
I think you make a good point that it is a choice to surround yourself with those who are empathetic to you, maybe even unconditionally love you.
Yeah.
As Brene also talks about, is this bravery, this choice to be authentic in your life. It's also an acceptance that you're going to disappoint people. You're going to piss people
For
off.
sure you are. We all
It's
do.
a trade-off.
Yeah.
Yeah. Do you want to be liked or do you want to kind of live your truth? So it is, well, I mean, if this was easy, I'd be doing it.
Both.
Right. Just to finish off the armor, there's also perfectionism. So it's interesting. She says, when perfectionism is driving, shame is always riding shotgun. Now, I say that a bit with a twang because she's from Texas.
Right.
I love how she
You
says,
really didn't have a twang there.
not
at all.
at all?
Not
Okay.
really.
I thought maybe I heard a little Texan come out, but no, that didn't happen. But yeah, she says y'all and
Yeah.
dang it.
Oh, yeah.
Oh, she's good times. Anyway, so yeah, perfectionism.
And she's a marketing machine now.
Oh, she's such a big deal. But I really do appreciate that she talked about not talking from her fresh wounds, because our friend Rachel Hollis sure did just like
That sure is the flip side, isn't it?
sitting there on her podcast like a few minutes after her divorce
Yeah.
and just bared it all.
Love me. I haven't sorted any of my life out.
So I'm going to spend the next 20 minutes floodlighting.
Well, I think that that's somebody who's like trying to be the mess, as we talk about,
Yep.
still being a hot mess. I think
Yep.
that's her going, I'm a mess. This is the point. And it's like, not so sure about that, self-help guru.
See, I think embracing the fact that you're a hot mess is going to lead to vulnerability. Being a hot mess, you're going to just floodlight people.
Yeah.
People are just going to like,
Yeah.
Okay,
Like
girl.
Glennon Doyle doesn't do that, does she? She's very, what's the word? I mean, authentic, I guess.
Yeah.
You
she's all about telling the truth.
Yeah, but do you find that she's doing what Rachel Hollis does?
No, everything is retrospective in her life.
Yeah.
Anyway. So just a point about perfectionism. She calls it the 20-ton shield. It's a way of thinking that if I look perfect, if I live perfect, and work perfect, I can avoid or minimize criticism, blame, or ridicule. So it's a shield that we hope that protects us from being hurt, but all it does is prevents us from being seen.
Why are we so afraid to be a mess, to be just the regular old mess? I mean, I get that maybe there are levels. I don't know. But why are we so afraid? Is it because we're just judgy assholes, all of us? So, it's inevitable. Like, why? Why aren't we just like, hey, man, this is me? Like,
so Brene actually speaks about women and perfectionism and the shame that's also tied into it. She's like, women's shame often comes from the damned if you do, damned if you don't. Hold on. Comes from the damned if you do, damned if you don't. Oh, that's terrible. Okay. All right. I'm not an actor.
thank you for being so vulnerable.
Damned if you do, damned if you don't scenario that we find ourselves in regularly. Okay, so does this sound familiar to you, Fanson? Be perfect, but don't make a fuss about it, and don't take time away from anything like your family or your partner or your work to achieve your perfection.
You lost me at don't.
Don't upset anyone or hurt anyone's feelings, but say what's on your mind. I'm not a mind reader. Dial the sexuality way up. After the kids are asleep, the dog is walked, and the house is tidy. But dial it way down in public. Just be yourself, but not if it means being shy or unsure. There's nothing sexier than self-confidence.
Or loud and outspoken. Calm down, girl.
Don't make people feel uncomfortable, but be honest. Don't get too emotional, but don't be too detached either. Too emotional and you're hysterical. Too detached and you're a cold-hearted bitch. The patriarchal paradigm.
Yeah, and
that
I just
sets
want
us
to
up
say
for
that as much as
shame and perfection.
I as a woman have experienced a lot of those things.
Yep.
I totally get the message.
Yeah.
I also think men have been told how to be also.
Oh, sure.
You know?
I mean, that
I
was
think
just her.
we are all basically told, the rules of behavior, the things that work, the things that don't. And,
It was in one of her TED Talks.
but
where
the
she-
perfectionism is I think the point that you were making, which is like, it's impossible. You can't be perfect to everyone. You are perfect the way you are.
That's right. You're still a hot mess.
Still on.
And it's okay. But I do think that is the shield. It's like, if I appear flawless, then I won't have to, admit.
Eventually,
to
like the sun
any-
can't stay behind the clouds forever. You know what I mean? Like you can try that, but something's going to give.
And the last piece of armor.
Probably going to get sick. Something's going to happen if you're constantly. Like, it's one thing to keep yourself in check. I'm all for that. Keep yourself in check. Like, you don't have to spill out all over the place. That's called something else.
Yep.
Keeping yourself in check is great. That's
Yes.
adulting a little bit. And
Yes.
it's okay to adult. It's okay to be accountable. It's okay to have learned some things. It's okay to have some control over who you are. That's all right. But it's okay to have the mess too.
Like you said, it's socialization.
Yeah.
Like screaming and crying in the grocery store is not appropriate for an adult. I don't love it in
Not
kids
for
either.
anybody under 45.
And the last way we try to shield ourselves from vulnerability is by not letting ourselves feel joy. So she calls this foreboding joy. According to Brené's research, joy is the most vulnerable of emotions. Would
Because you
agree
look
with that?
real silly.
It's just
Oh
like
yeah,
scary
you
to
look
feel-
when you're full of joy. You look ridiculous.
it's like, calm down.
calm down.
So afraid to risk the vulnerability of feeling joy, we instead try to pre-grieve, or as Brené would say, dress rehearse tragedy. So with the hopes that this will soften the blow should the worst happen. Do you ever do that?
Well, I definitely am like worst case scenario kind of stuff. Like always this. I think that is definitely a protection sort of thing.
Yep.
Where I'm like, yeah, like the potential hazard is this.
Like you're like, God, everything's really good right now.
Yeah.
Oh shit. When's the other shoe gonna drop?
Oh yeah, that.
That's the foreboding joy.
Yeah. Yeah. Oh, I've had that. I've heard that voice where it's like, oh yeah, everything is awesome.
Yep.
And then this little voice is like, oh, wait a minute. What's around that corner?
Yeah. So that's just kind of like the armor going on. It's
Yeah.
like this is a very scary feeling you're having. You're
Yeah.
happy.
Yeah.
You're not used to it.
it. But also joy. I mean, I would say that I've also said to myself at times, Cal, just get silly for crying out loud. Like, what are you holding back right now? And I think sometimes when I think about being silly, not like going out of my way to be silly,
Yeah.
but just like that silly feeling that comes with just that kind of happiness and freedom.
Yeah.
What's associated with that is, oh, you're going to look like an idiot.
Yeah. Like acting silly, whatever you're kind of thinking about right now in whatever way that's a demonstration of vulnerability.
It's
You're
different to be silly on stage when people are paying for you to be silly
Yes.
than it is when you're in your own life sitting at the dinner table and you start being a silly goof. You hope
Yep.
everyone's going to be on board with that.
Yeah. You're opening yourself up for that judgment and criticism.
But really what you do is you bring like a real sparkle to that dinner table.
I think it's appreciated more than people are even willing to admit. That would require vulnerability for them to say, actually, that was really cool. But anyway, no. Deep down, I think people savor people's silliness. So I don't know, actually, when you connect the dots right now, I don't know why we're actually so scared of it.
Yeah.
Anyway, so with the armor, it's just
Because we want
important.
other people to do it.
Yes.
We're afraid if we do it, we're going to fail miserably.
And around we go.
There it is.
So important to note that armor eventually prevents you from being seen and heard by others and using your gifts. So the way out of the armor is to get curious about how you feel, how you're interpreting and responding to things, how you handle things, and how you treat people. You're like, okay, what is kind of like holding me back right now? So she just kind of like is just really interested in people stopping and going, what's up?
You know what?
What fear or shame is preventing me right
I
now?
just want to tag that with, it's one thing to be the person saying, I'm going to be vulnerable.
Yeah.
I'm going to take this, leap to that unknown, but also be someone who recognizes vulnerability in others. Be someone who can see it and who will support it. Be that person. So instead of all about, oh, I have to be that vulnerable person, just start looking for it and start responding in kind to it.
Okay, so I think that's an excellent point. We want to be a little bit more empathetic when someone is bearing their
Start looking for vulnerability in others and yeah,
bearing their truth in whatever way.
and show them that you tell them you appreciate it.
Because then we're affirming the behavior that we want to see more often.
Yeah.
And that's how we create the culture.
Yeah.
We're daring greatly. we're leading greatly, whatever it's called, daring to lead. Oh, whatever. Anyway, check out Brene Brown.
Check her out. You know what? You know what that leads to?
Oh my goodness. Right now, it's time to play that game that always presents times of uncertainty, risk, and emotional exposure.
It sure does.
It's time to play
Name That Guru.
Yes, this is when we read 3 self-help quotes to each other and the other person tries to identify what self-help guru said it.
Oh, it's going to be a tough one. Okay.
Okay.
Here we go.
Are you going first?
Right? Everyone's paying attention.
You got your phone out. You're
Yeah,
ready.
Everybody's got their stuff at home.
Yeah.
Everybody's ready.
We're ready to play, Fanson.
Okay.
Here we go.
Should I go first?
Sure.
I never go first.
Okay.
Those who have a strong sense of love and belonging have the courage to be imperfect.
God, that sounds
I know. Think
so
about
familiar.
it. It's
GA.
You can take a couple stabs at it if you want.
I'm gonna say Brene Brown.
Oh my gosh! Yes, you got it. Oh wow!
Wow. You know what? It was touch and go there.
Okay, here, give me one.
Okay. Life is about being in the arena and putting yourself out there. Shame is the gremlin that says, nope, you're not good enough.
Oh, okay. Gremlin.
Yeah.
Okay, I'm sort of thinking Eckhart Tolle, but no. Hold on a sec. Wait a minute.
Yeah. Yeah.
Give me a sec.
Think about it.
Is it Brene Brown?
It is.
Oh my gosh! It's so hard for me to get them.
Well done, Fanson.
Wow, that's really good.
Okay. You're next.
Okay, I'll do one. Here we go. Vulnerability, just on theme, is not winning or losing. It's having the courage to show up when you can't control the outcome. Yeah, it's good.
Now this one sounds familiar.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I can.
It's not.
Do you need a hint?
Is it? I'm going to go out on a
Oh,
limb.
okay.
Brene Brown.
Oh, yes, it
Oh my God.
is.
Are we on fire today or what?
Wow, I don't know if you've had 2
Amazing.
in a row before. I don't know
Listen,
if
I
have.
don't want to brag, but
Yeah, you're doing very well.
okay. You are imperfect. You are wired for struggle, but you are worthy of love and belonging.
Love and belonging.
Take your time.
Love and belonging.
Yeah.
Does it rhymes with clown?
You're getting there.
Is it Brene Brown?
You got it. Unprecedented times.
Holy smokes! Oh,
I mean-
I'm sweating over here.
Uh,
Okay,
all right. Here's my last one.
all right. Is it me or is it you?
Oh God, I
Is
just
it me?
lost. Wow,
think
that's
it's
never
me.
happened because it's never gone this fast.
No, that's true.
Okay.
Okay. Faith. This could be anybody. Is a place of mystery where we find the courage, could be a giveaway, to believe in what we cannot see and the strength to let go of our fear of uncertainty. It's almost poetry.
I think you've got a theme.
I might.
Brene Brown.
Whoa.
A perfect score.
That's amazing. All right. Well, it's up to me now.
This is it.
Okay. Here we
Okay,
go.
Fanson, the
All right.
brokenhearted are the most courageous around us. They put themselves out there in the arena and risked losing it all. There isn't anything more powerful and beautiful than a skinned and bruised heart.
I think this is totally meant for me.
There you go.
Oh my God.
This one is for you,
just
baby.
Go like, yeah.
Yep.
Well, I
mean,
I gotta
right?
say,
I'm like,
I think I got it.
okay.
Could it be Brene Brown?
So brave.
It
and
was
so
either
right.
Brene or Beyonce.
So brave and so right.
I know.
Oh my goodness. Well, today, Fanson, for the very first time in the Still a Hot Mess history, We have both.
3 for 3.
Perfect. We're both batting.
What a game, huh?
Perfect game. Pitched a perfect game.
Okay, slow down.
Okay, yeah.
All right. Well, that's it.
Well, that was the little discussion on vulnerability, but
It was little, but it was mighty.
It was little, it was mighty, but we can't help but say if you want to learn anything about it, you go to BreneBrown.com.
Seriously, just Google. It's all there.
And so many great videos on YouTube. Like she's got TED Talks and stuff. So anyway.
Yeah. And guys, just, for a moment so we can be vulnerable and say, could you please subscribe? Could you please pass us along? Could you please tell your friends so they can tell 2 friends and so on?
Spread
and
the
so on.
good word.
Yeah, spread the word.
And if you've got the iPhone, you go to the podcast app
Mm-hmm.
and you click, you write a rating.
Yeah.
You write a rating? No, you rate and review.
It's funny how vulnerable I feel asking people to do that
Let's get us out there.
for like fear of rejection where they're like, I don't think so.
Not this show.
You wanna.
Anyways,
All
great to see you again. And
You
thank
too.
you so much for tuning in and listening to our show today. Until next time, you're Kelly Fanson.
You're Susan Stewart.
And we're
Still a hot mess. We'd like to thank our sponsor, Purple Jade Wellness Center, for your support. Thanks also to Monkey Junk, the Juno Award-winning blues band consisting of some of the best people and musicians we know. We'd also like to thank and give a 3-minute hug, because self-help says that's more meaningful, to the Pod Plant and Mike Wixon.
And hey, why not subscribe or follow our show? And please, for the love of Oprah, give us a rating and review on your iPhone podcast app. And if you're into social media, you can find us on Instagram at Still a Hot Mess Podcast and like us on Facebook at Still a Hot Mess. And thank you, Fanson.
And thank you, Susan.
You make a mess of me.